It is Locked On NBA Game Night for the night of Tuesday, August 6th. On today's show, did the Knicks ace their offseason, and should they be considered the favorites to win the Eastern Conference? One of us, maybe both of us, think they should. Let's jump in.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
All right, welcome to an off-season edition of Locked On NBA Game Night. Wes Goldberg here with the host of Locked On Knicks, the one and only Gavin, Schall. However, you might be tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Have a great show for you today. We're going to take a look at which current NBA players are a lock to make the Hall of Fame and which players are on the Hall of Fame bubble. But we'll do that in a second. First, I want to start with this Athletic article that gave the Knicks, Gavin, a B-plus grade for their offseason. To recap the moves that they made really quick, they signed Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele. They extended Mikal Bridges with a 4-year, $150 million contract over the weekend, and they swapped out Tom Thibodeau for Mike Brown at head coach. So, Gavin, since you're the expert and the host of Locked On Knicks, I thought we could do a Knicks deep dive today. Do you think a B-plus grade is fair for the Knicks offseason?
That is, we haven't done an episode yet where we've given them a grade. That's a good idea. Maybe that's what I'll talk about tonight. But I think that is a perfect grade for the New York Knicks. I think moving on from Tom Thibodeau was probably my number one bullet point for this offseason. If you want to get deeper on that, we can. The biggest thing for me was just not playing the Knicks' best lineups and adjusting only when his hand was pushed beyond reason and not really adjusting preemptively. And also teams sometimes just get tired of the same voice. There was real discontent in the locker room, particularly Mikal Bridges. I think no coincidence that he signs an extension a little bit after Tom Thibodeau is let go, about the number of minutes the starters were playing, just some of the lack of flexibility. So to me, that was the single biggest thing. They got that done. Probably didn't get their number one choice at head coach. They very famously reached out to literally the entire NBA. I'm surprised, Wes, maybe a sign of respect that they didn't reach out for your guy, Eric Spoelstra, trying to pull.
We don't know that they didn't.
Pat Riley. I guess not. Maybe that just didn't leave.
Exactly.
Yeah. But they tried for the entire league very famously. Jason Kidd seemed to be the name that they wanted the most. Mike Brown seemed somewhere like fourth on that list. I think that's actually a pretty good outcome for the New York Knicks. Really happy with very minimal cap flexibility. They get Jordan Clarkson. They get Gershon Yabusele. They address a very real weakness in not having quite enough playable shooting, I think is the way I would phrase it last year. Didn't have a draft pick in the first round. Summer League went fine. I think given the limited ability they had to improve, they did about as well as you could have hoped for without maybe hitting a home run like if Giannis had requested a trade and they somehow were able to get him.
So in terms of the Mike Brown piece, the more I've thought about it, the more I like it for the Knicks. Mike Brown is going to experiment quite a bit. He's not the most creative and the most experimental coach, but he's going to experiment more than Tom Thibodeau in the regular season with lineups and different things. He's also obviously, he was a coach of the year and a head coach for a long time before being on Steve Kerr's staff in Golden State. But under Steve Kerr, he's learned a lot of new things. And I think one of the things he took away from being on Steve Kerr's staff was also having a quick hook with rotations and being willing to try different lineups, right? He was on staff when Golden State always used to go into that death lineup in the small lineups where they would routinely, change out their starters and things like that. That is something that Tom Thibodeau wasn't very apt to do until very late in the playoffs this past season. Mike Brown, I think, just has a little bit of a quicker hook to do that. So I like the hire there. I like Mike Brown in New York. He's also a pro, and he's going to be able to handle the Knicks of it all. And that was the biggest concern I had when they moved on from Thibodeau is the great thing about Tibbs in New York was that he made basketball the main thing. And you know this as well as anybody, Gavin. That was not the case for a really long time with the Knicks. It was a lot of James Dolan. It was a lot of Knicks. It was a lot of turmoil and disappointment. And Tibbs kind of quieted the noise and made basketball the main thing. Mike Brown can do the same thing. Mike Brown can make basketball a priority in New York, which is a heavy lift. And I think Mike Brown is capable of making that lift. I love the Jordan Clarkson deal, and I love the Gershon Yabusele deal. These were not the loudest offseason additions. I would venture to say they're some of the best value additions this summer because you're getting them close to the minimum on both occasions. Clarkson, yeah, he hasn't been in the playoffs for a long time here. Last played in the playoffs in 2022. Is a proven playoff bucket getter. Like, that's a guy who's capable of coming in and scoring quickly. So if you're basically replacing Campaign with Jordan Clarkson, that's an obvious upgrade. And then if you're replacing, I suppose, the Precious Achua minutes with Gershon Yabusele, I think that's an upgrade. And Yabu can play next to Mitchell Robinson. He can play next to Cat. I think that makes a lot of sense. He gives them a snot factor that I think that they were missing in that front court outside of whatever you want to call Josh Hart, I guess, these days. But I like the additions quite a bit. I think having those guys that is your 7th, 8th, 9th guys, I think that's a huge boost to a team that, frankly, kind of didn't have a ton of depth last year.
Yeah, I think Jordan Clarkson in particular, I just love his ability to create off the dribble. They got a little bit of that in Campaign, but Clarkson, I think, just an underrated playmaker throughout his career, and now going to have just like a lot more talented shooters to pass to than he did on the Jazz. And that was something the Knicks, I mean, especially just because Tom Thibodeau didn't run the most creative offense in the world, really deeply missed without Julius Randle. Just the ability to crash into the lane, draw a crowd, and kick out and generate corner threes. Cat, like, not that he ever takes a ton in his career, but I think he shot maybe 11 corner threes all of last season. I have to double check that stat, but it was somewhere in that range. Deuce McBride, who like throughout his entire career is one of the elite corner 3-point shooters in the NBA, went down to merely good. I think the season before, like OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges might have been 1 and 2 in the entire league in either corner league like makes or percentage. They were in that mix. They were both a little bit less effective from that area. Just having another guy who can generate those types of shots. And Gershon Yabusele, 40% on above the break threes last year on high volume, 69% in the restricted area. You look at like the most just valuable real estate in the game. He dominated those areas. Not a fantastic defender, but to your point, gives you just enough like versatility that you can really mess around with the front court. And there are some rumors that the Knicks are considering sticking with that late Tom Thibodeau adjustment and beginning the season double big Karl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson. I love that Yabusele, like if there's an injury or even when there's not, like you can just get any type of lineup on the floor with him in the mix. OG Anunoby gives you some of that versatility as well. And to your point, you trust Mike Brown a little bit more than Tom Thibodeau to maximize all that. I still have some questions if they're going to get to their best lineups, which in my mind involved Deuce McBride starting, because those lineups were some of the best in the NBA. Like when he played with the starters, or when he played in place of Mikal Bridges or in place of Josh Hart, and just like the high volume 3-point shooting that they missed after moving on from Dante DiVincenzo, and Bridges and Anunoby don't quite provide. He gives you that. And just a level of playmaking defensively that adds some much needed verve. So personally, I would start him. I don't think that's going to be how Mike Brown starts the season. I'm curious to see if they ultimately get to lineups that get their best shooters, their best playmakers on the floor more.
In 30 seconds, can you tell us what the Mikal Bridges contract extension means for the Knicks now and going forward?
Yeah, I think it was ultimately a necessary move. I mean, obviously everyone knows the phrase sunk cost fallacy. Like you don't want to sign him just because of the picks you gave up. I think it was somewhat inevitable unless they were going to be able to move him for a better player this offseason, and they were going to re-sign him. He takes $6 million off of what he could have gotten, which is significant, with the Knicks pressing up to the second apron, likely to go over the second apron sometime in the next couple of seasons, unless they choose to move on from Mitchell Robinson, which is a very real possibility. I think this is also a bet that Mikal Bridges is going to be better. Like he came in like relatively, I mean, not late. The trade was early in the offseason, but like still like a quick adjustment into a team with incredibly high expectations. He was the pressure point. Yeah, I think even more so than Karl Anthony Towns, given those 5 picks that went out for him. His shot was broken, and he was clearly kind of working it throughout the year, which is why he was so elite from mid-range and just didn't really generate the necessary power from the 3-point line, and really, really struggled on above the break threes. I think that's going to be a lot more compact. And Tom Thibodeau completely misused him defensively. He was the worst high volume screen navigator in all of basketball last year. I would expect that he's going to be used off the ball a little bit more under Mike Brown, like he was in the playoffs, and that's going to make him significantly better on that end of the floor. So I have optimism that even if he's not the guy the Knicks traded 5 firsts for, he will be a very useful piece and will live up to that contract for the Knicks.
So FanDuel has the Knicks just behind the Cavs as the second best odds to win the East. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're going to take a look at what current NBA players are most likely to make the Hall of Fame. I'm going to tell you my 15 locks and why one former MVP is not on that list. That's coming up next here on Locked On NBA Game Night. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's a game day and suddenly you realize that you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money that you save on tickets, you could splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. You have better things to do than browsing different ticket sites and clicking through sections of stadiums to find different deals. Game Time Zone Deals picks the best seats in your section for you and provides seat views right in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to be and where your tickets are, and that your tickets are coming at a great price. And then you can move on to the rest of your day. Go back to work, making dinner, playing 2K, whatever it is that you'd rather be doing than browsing ticket sites. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On NBA Game Night. The best way to support the show is to subscribe on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. So FanDuel has the Knicks, gives them the second best odds just behind the Cleveland Cavaliers to win the Eastern Conference. Gavin, I think that's fair. They've won 47 games in every season since Jalen Brunson came over, at least 50 in each of the last two. They've also won a playoff series in each of these seasons, including making the Eastern Conference Finals last season, obviously. I think that this is a regular season wins machine. It wouldn't, and obviously the Cavs are too. I think the biggest difference between the Knicks and the Cavs is that the Knicks at least have that playoff success in terms of reaching the Eastern Conference Finals, where the Cavaliers just haven't really had that much playoff success, right? They beat up on a very weak, limping, post-Jimmy Butler trade Miami Heat team that had to escape the play-in tournament just to get there in the first round last year, and then got wiped off the floor in the second round. The Cavs are not scaring anybody, I think, in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, where I don't know if the Knicks are scaring anybody, but with Boston and Indiana taking a gap year here, I kind of think the Knicks should be the favorites in the East. What about you?
Yeah, I think maybe very slightly. It's such a toss-up in my mind. I think Cleveland is clearly the best regular season team, like by a pretty substantial margin. We're going to talk about a little later if Darius Garland's injury interferes with that at all. And the proof of concept stuff for Cleveland is interesting, right? Because in 2023, like the Knicks clown them in a very real way. Like Mitchell Robinson just physically dominated Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. Jared Allen had the famous quote that the lights were a little bit brighter than he expected. And then the last 2 years, like it's hard to know how much to take away, right? Because they've been very injured 2 years in a row. They run into a great Celtics team, probably wouldn't have mattered in 2024 and 2025. You run into a red hot Pacers team, like half of your stars are hurt or hampered. But there is this real lack of just guttiness that we've seen from them outside of Donovan Mitchell, who's obviously been a playoff killer from day one. And with the Knicks, you get these massive vacillations in the playoffs where I don't think they've at any point been optimized. I think 2024 was probably even more so than last year, their best chance to make a run, but they were incredibly injured that year. Last season, I don't think we got to see the best version of their team because of the aforementioned limitations and how Tom Thibodeau used lineups. And yet, like in big moments, like we saw them like dominate the Celtics in game 1 and 2 in the fourth quarter. We saw Jalen Brunson sharing a court with Jason Tatum. I mean, Tatum was amazing. So I don't want to say Brunson was clearly the best player, but he put up 18 points and 7 assists in the third quarter of probably the biggest Knicks game, maybe the biggest Knicks quarter of the last 25 years. Like having that guy on your side is a very real difference maker. I bet on him. I bet on Mitch's physicality. I bet on some extent on Karl Anthony Towns shot making. If you want to have a counter argument, it's that like Brunson and Cat as a duo defensively and like that level of weakness is something Cleveland just doesn't have. There's not an obvious way to attack the Cavs. Cleveland beat the Knicks 4 times last year. If Cavs fans want to say it's ridiculous, they should clearly be the favorite. They were just hurt last year. I'm all for it, right? I hear that. I buy it. I just think the Knicks, there's a little bit more proof of concept in the playoffs.
All right, let's shift gears because I want to talk about this this interesting Reddit post that looked back at NBA history and claims that there are an average of 30 future Hall of Famers playing in any given season. So I thought we could try to figure out the 30 future Hall of Famers playing this season. So if we start with the obvious ones, I think we have 15 locks. I'm going to ask you if you agree or disagree on any of these names. So my 15 locks, the way I figure it, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Nikola Jokic, Giannis, Anthony Davis, Damian Lillard, Kawhi Leonard. Any disagreements so far? I have a few more locks. Okay. Then I have, I feel pretty good about these 4. Kyrie Irving, Paul George, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson.
I agree all those will be Hall of Famers. I question the deserve part a little bit with Paul George, but I'll caveat all this with saying it feels like anyone who's ever a borderline case seems to get in. So that will be my default throughout this conversation. I think deserve is a different one. I agree all 4 of those guys will probably be Hall of Famers.
The way I figured like the locks is like if these guys retired within the next couple of years, they're probably in the Hall of Fame. And I think that's the case for all these guys. All right. So that leaves us with a bunch of players I obviously did not name. So maybe we go back and forth here, but I have fringe guys that are 30 plus years old who I couldn't quite figure out whether or not they're going to be in it. Then you have a bunch of guys that are under 30 years old, a bunch of guys who are younger, but still a significant body of work. So do you want to just do a draft at this point in terms of who we think are the next guys in? Because we have 15 locks. That means we have 15 more players that on average are going to be in the Hall of Fame one day.
Yeah, let's do it. But my initial guys, so maybe this is different than how you formatted it. I had, before I got to those like late career guys, I had like just the superstars of today. And I think that is a 4-person list. I had Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jason Tatum, and Joel Embiid is clearly the iffiest one of that group. I just think the like winning an MVP, unless you have a Derrick Rose-esque path, which he has in some ways, but not quite that bad. Like it is hard not to get into the Hall of Fame. So those were my next 4. But do you have those guys in? And then was your next group more so like late career guys?
So I feel really good about SGA, Luka, and Tatum getting in.
Yeah.
Like their body of work this early, it just feels like that's happening. So I have them as guys who I think are going to be in. Embiid was the guy I had on the fringe. I can't figure it out with him. There is no questioning his regular season numbers. Does have an MVP award, and this is who I was teasing going into this segment here, has pretty much 0 playoff success to speak of. And that's the part that I can't quite I can't get there in terms of calling him a lock. Now, if you ask me to guess, is he going to be in the Hall of Fame one day? I'd probably say yes. So he's on my fringe, but I couldn't have him as a lock.
Well, look, can I throw out a name? Like Vince Carter recently got in. Like I would say Joel Embiid right now is undeniably had a better career than Vince Carter. Obviously the dunk stuff maybe is an extra factor, but that was kind of my counterpoint to it.
So that means we've got 4 guys. That gives us 19 guys. Can I nominate another name here?
Yeah, go for it.
Jimmy Butler.
He was literally the next guy on my list. So yeah, I'm with you.
He probably gets in as well.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing about Jimmy is he's almost the opposite Embiid case, right? Where he has very little regular season success. You go back and look at his numbers, they're basically Tobias Harris.
Yeah.
And then you look at his playoff stuff, and it's just like, these are 2 different players. Like there's some crazy stretches there, and the whole playoff Jimmy branding and everything like that, it's pretty loud. But then you also dive into the numbers more, and you're like, we're really kind of only talking about 2 or 3 playoff series or playoff runs for this guy where he was playing at a Hall of Fame level. Outside of that, no regular season MVPs, is not as many All-Stars as you think he is, not as many All-NBAs as you think he has. Obviously doesn't have a championship nor a Finals MVP to go along with it. The resume is kind of spotty. And when you're starting to list off the Jimmy Butler accomplishments, once you get past the handful of All-Stars and All-NBA stuff, it's looked like Michael Jordan for a month. And again, I think he'll probably get in because almost everybody gets in. I just like the resume isn't as rock solid, I think, as people think.
I completely agree with you. I think given the world we live in terms of basketball, where Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant are idolized as like the two greatest killers of all time. Obviously, Jimmy Butler without a finals on his resume is not in the same stratosphere of those conversations, but it's just someone who will go down as such a competitive killer and someone who just, you felt like he had a psychological advantage over almost anyone in the NBA in those years where he was great. I think that'll carry him through, even if, to your point, like maybe the meat in the pie, that's a weird analogy, isn't really there. But go ahead.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Maybe the creamer in the coffee. I don't know. In the big face coffee.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to keep doing this. We've got a few more fringe guys and a few more under 30 guys that we need to talk about. Plus, according to a new report, apparently Damian Lillard never even wanted to leave Portland in the first place. Buy or sell is also after this. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or your computer. You remember that picture of Joe Dumars on the two phones? He definitely did not have Open Phone. And look what happened to him. He just traded an unprotected future pick to move up to 13 in the draft and then spent his summer adding Jordan Poole to the roster. Don't be a meme. Get Open Phone. Open Phone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have an existing number with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers, no bad trades to ruin your franchise. All right, let's keep going with our little Hall of Fame draft here. Is there another name on the top of your list?
Yeah, so I got into like the late career guys, and a lot of this, I'm sure you were looking at the same thing, was the Basketball Reference Hall of Fame probability list. They had DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry, and Kevin Love pretty much as locks, and this made me like, my visceral reaction to this, which is funny because these guys all, to your point, probably have far better resumes in terms of the regular season success than someone like Jimmy Butler. And yet I felt kind of queasy in like different ways about all of them. Like DeMar DeRozan scored 25,000 career points. That pretty much puts you in the Hall of Fame. And yet, like, my baseline with this stuff a lot of times was like, capable of being the best player on a finals team, even if they weren't. You just felt like at their peak, they could have gotten there. Or just like an extremely memorable role player on a consistently incredible team, like a Klay Thompson, like a Draymond Green, right? And role player obviously does those guys short, but I'm saying by that standard. And like Kyle Lowry would be close to that, but just one championship. Kevin Love, 5 All-Star appearances, obviously like at his apex, just an incredible offensive player, memorable piece of one of the most memorable title teams we've gotten in the last 20 years. DeRozan, like I never really felt that way about him. And it's just like the fact that like, I think the most memorable thing about his career was that he wasn't the guy, and he so clearly wasn't the guy compared to LeBron James, who just clowned them every year. And then he was traded directly for the guy, and Toronto immediately won a title. And yet it's hard to argue with 25,000 career points. Lowry's such a killer and just was around for so long. I get it, but I never put him, like, was there any point in his career where he's clearly a top 10 player in the league? Probably, but not for a long time. So all those guys, I think, kind of have arguments for and against.
I think they're all in.
Yeah.
You pretty much laid out the case. Lowry, Love, DeRozan. I think they're all in. Where I kind of get with my fringe 30-plus-year-old guys, Rudy Gobert, Al Horford, Pascal Siakam. To me, Gobert also gets in. There's just too many Defensive Player of the Year awards there. Unless you disagree. Horford and Siakam, I think, are real fringe guys. Horford, a ton of success, played in the league for a lot of years, has a championship now after winning with Boston a couple years ago. Pascal Siakam, 2 finals appearances, won a championship as, I think, clearly the second best player on that 2019 Raptors team behind Kawhi. 3-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA guy. And I think he's on the fringe, but I kind of think he's also one of these guys who probably has another 2 or 3 All-NBA placements in front of him. And heck, who knows, when Haliburton comes back in a couple years, maybe there's another finals run in there with him and the Pacers. So I think I have him on the fringe right now, but what do you think about Horford and Siakam?
Yeah, I agree with you on Gobert. I have a feeling Horford ultimately gets in. I think the championship with the Celtics puts him over the top. And I think his who he was defensively, like puts him in a slightly different category than Pascal to me. I don't know if that's fair. Pascal was obviously just like, again, at times the best player on a team that could have beaten an all-time great team to win a championship. I think Pascal, I mean, just as a product of his age, still has a lot of work to do to get there and to build up some of that regular season success, unless they win a championship in Indiana. That would maybe put him over the top.
Any other old heads that we haven't mentioned yet?
That was pretty much it on my old heads list. Drew Holiday was like the one guy I had like 2 championships, really key piece on both. I think probably just like a notch below what you need from like a production and an all-star perspective, but just like a quintessential, like great role player on winning teams for a long time, like could be on the periphery of those conversations.
2-time champion, has a gold medal.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Drew Holiday in the media and in the NBA. I'm going to go out on a limb. Drew Holiday is very far from a lock on the Basketball Reference probabilities report. I think he's getting in. I think he'll get in. I just think that that's the way voters are going to vote. I love Drew Holiday. I'm not even trying to dismiss it. I just like there's almost zero statistical case to put him in, but he's just beloved. So that gives us 4 or 5 more guys. If we're looking at under 30, we already mentioned Tatum, Luka, and Shea. The other group would be Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, Victor Wembanyama, Jalen Brunson. There's a few other guys that we could start talking about, but among that group, who do you feel best about?
That's it's fine. I didn't even consider Wemby because he wasn't anywhere on that list, but he's probably like, the blood clots are obviously scary, but if he's healthy, this sounds weird to say about a guy who's played 2 seasons, but he's going to get in. The other 2 I had that you didn't mention, unless I missed it, were, I think you might have mentioned Jaylen Brown. I had Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton were those are my other ones. I think Jalen Brunson, if he does roughly this for another 4 years, like there are just very few guys who have scored like him in the playoffs. He's currently scoring. If the Knicks are a contender another couple seasons, I think he'll get in. I bet Devin Booker eventually gets in. I think he's probably going to go down as right there with Steve Nash as the greatest Phoenix Sun of all time. I think that'll be enough to push him over the top. Jaylen Brown, finals MVP. I think the Celtics will be back. They'll be contenders for a long time. I think he'll get in. I know we limited it to 30. I think there's 40 guys that I could say, like, if you put a gun to my head and said pick, I would say are eventually going to get in.
Yeah, we're talking about even fringe of the fringy guys too, like guys like Bam Adebayo, Trae Young. I don't know if we talked about him yet, but just there's a ton of guys here. But I think we feel pretty good about our 24, 25, 26 locks here. But let's move on to our final segment here. It's our what we do here at the end of every episode here on Tuesdays. It is buy or sell. Let's jump right in. A source told ESPN that Damian Lillard never actually wanted to leave Portland. Gavin, buy or sell that if it were up to Dame, he would never have been traded?
Sell. I mean, he requested the trade. In the article, the interesting quote was from Lillard. More than anything, it was miscommunication and misunderstandings. Joe and I never talked about a potential return. It just sat out there and we let it be what it was. I think that was the mistake. My interpretation of this is he wanted to go to Miami. If he knew 100% Miami was off the table, maybe Portland was the second choice on that list. But that being ambiguous, I don't think there was ever a point in his head where he was like, I 100% want to stay here, because it was pretty clear he'd rather be in Miami. Wes, I'm talking to the expert on this. Do you agree with that?
I do. The rest of this quote that they left off, I feel like I never wanted to leave Portland if I wasn't going to Miami. He requested a trade specifically to one team. He had one team on his list of trade destinations, and it was the Miami Heat. And he very publicly never wanted to be in Milwaukee. He wanted to get traded to Miami. He did not want to get traded. That was not a trade request. It was a request to get traded to Miami. They didn't do that. Joe Cronin, the Portland Trailblazers GM, refused to do it. And conversations never even really got that far that summer. So, yeah, I'm selling this hard. But I think it's a great story that he ended up back in Portland anyway. Cavaliers coach Kenny Atkinson told Chris Fedor that he does not expect Darius Garland to be ready by training camp, as he is still recovering from offseason toe surgery. Gavin, buy or sell this as a serious issue for the Cavs?
I'm selling it. I said it first segment. I think there is a really healthy margin for error there, even with the Celtics at full strength. Like, they were the first seed in the East, like with a pretty decent cushion. And like, he's still on track, right? Surgery was on June 9th. They said 4 to 5 months. I'm not great at math, but outside time of that is November 9th, which like maybe he misses 10 games if you want to be really conservative. And I don't think there's any reason why they shouldn't be conservative. I don't think there's like, as much as like I was kind of arguing the Knicks might be the favorite, I don't think like even the worst case scenario, there's a team on the road that the Cavs should really fear. The only real concerns there, like they obviously don't have great point guard depth. You in a perfect world don't want to be playing Lonzo Ball 30 plus minutes a game right off the bat. Craig Porter Jr. is a nice player, not necessarily, Cavs fans correct me if I'm off on this, a natural point guard. The only interesting thing here to me is like, I still think there's a world where they're maybe better moving off one of Garland or Jared Allen. I don't know which one necessarily. And you might want just as large of a sample size of that to tell you, but they have had a couple seasons with these guys together. So I don't even think that's a big factor.
So I'm selling this, but I'm in the grocery aisle. I've got like the Quaker Oats brand name oatmeal in front of me. And I'm putting it back on the shelf and I'm moving over. I'm grabbing just the generic grocery store brand oatmeal, right? Sure. Because I'm selling this particular injury concern, but I'm buying the more general injury concern for Darius Garland because he's played 70 games. He played 70 games for the first time in his career last season. And we saw how last season ended for him with this toe injury. This guy has a knack of getting hurt. It's not always the same thing, but the toe is never good. I think it was a little bit surprising that he needed to have surgery over the summer to address this issue. So to me, I'm selling the fact that he might not be ready for training camp because I think there's so much chemistry with this group already that he doesn't necessarily need to be there. But I am buying overall injury wariness with Darius Garland. NBA.com published their Western Conference power rankings and had the Thunder at the top, followed by the Nuggets, Rockets, Timberwolves, and Clippers to round out their top five in the West. Gavin, buy or sell the Nuggets as the second best team in the West?
I think this is one of the easiest buys I've ever had on this show. I don't think it's particularly close. Obviously, the Rockets are incredibly talented. The Timberwolves have challenged the Nuggets. They've been to the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row. The Clippers are very deep and very old. Respect to all of them. But I go back to Isaiah Hartenstein was on Paul George's podcast this offseason. He said the Nuggets, keep in mind, a version of the Nuggets with zero depth, Michael Porter Jr. with one functional arm, Aaron Gordon limping around the last two games. He said they were the only team they felt if they played their best, they could still potentially lose against. I keep coming back to that and the fact that they went from 6.5 deep to potentially like 9.5, 10.5 deep. Like you look at their bench now, Bruce Brown, Julian Strawther, Tim Hardaway Jr., Peyton Watson, Deron Holmes, Jonas Valanciunas. Yes, there are still some question marks there. It is just such an immense leap over what they had last year. Cam Johnson, arguably an upgrade over Michael Porter Jr. in terms of night-to-night reliability. I am just incredibly confident in that team. And I just think Nikola Jokic is still far and away the last guy you want to see in the NBA in a playoff series. So I am 100% buying this. There are still some questions there we can get into about the Denver Nuggets. I just think the questions for all those other teams are much bigger.
The Rockets won the offseason. They got Kevin Durant. The Timberwolves have been in the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row, and it still feels like we're sleeping on them. And I say all of that, and I still buy this with all the money that I have. I love the Nuggets in the Western Conference. I think that as long as they can stack enough regular season wins where they're the number 2 seed in the West and they can avoid playing the Thunder before the Western Conference Finals, I feel pretty good about them reaching the Western Conference Finals, and then who knows what happens after that. You already mentioned the key point. They have the best player on the planet. They have Nikola Jokic, and they got deeper, and they got guys who we know play well with Nikola Jokic in terms of Bruce Brown, and then guys who we think are going to play very well next to Nikola Jokic, whether we're talking about Cam Johnson, Tim Hardaway Jr., and then they shored up their backup center spot with Valanciunas. So a really good offseason for the Nuggets as well. Last one here. According to Dan Wokey of The Athletic, Luka Doncic recently filmed an episode of Hot Ones. Buy or sell Luka's chances of finishing every wing and making it past the bomb?
How can it feels almost mean to say buy, but how can I not buy this? He's the guy is a sociopathic competitor. I still like at times in my dreams as someone who at one point in my life was a Phoenix Suns fan, think about him just staring into Devin Booker's soul in that famous Game 7. I think he'll do the equivalent to the wings. We know he can eat if he needs to / wants to. So I'm going to take it.
That's right. Maybe his diet will not allow him to finish the wings. He'll hit his calorie limit and he'd be like, I'm sorry.
That was my only counterpoint. Like, is he proving the haters right if he eats all of them? And he's like, I actually only want half, and I'm not going to drink that beer. I'm going to have a water.
Right. No milk. Milk is too dense in calories for me right now. Are these wings all gluten-free? They cannot be breaded. All these things. No, he's going to take down these wings, and I feel really good about it because you're right. He's a psycho competitor, and that's what psycho competitors do. That wraps up Locked On NBA Game Night. every game, every night. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. For Gavin, Schall, I'm Wes Goldberg, and this has been Game Night. Thanks for hanging out with us.